Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said his country appreciates India for not taking a, quote, one-sided view of the situation in Ukraine. Lavrov is in India hoping to shore up a time-tested partnership in the midst of crippling economic sanctions over the war in Ukraine. This is what he said at a meeting with Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar.
Our Western colleagues would like to reduce any meaningful international issue to the crisis in Ukraine. You know our position. We do not hide anything, and we appreciate that India is taking this situation in the entirety of facts, not just in a one-sided way.
And earlier in the day, Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar met Sergei Lavrov in Delhi. That's a tweet from Jaishankar's Twitter account. India's heavy reliance on Russian arms imports for its military has forced India to abstain from UN resolutions censuring Russia. Both countries are also exploring a currency mechanism that would allow India to purchase cheaper crude oil from Russia, sidestepping Western sanctions. And earlier today, Foreign Minister Lavrov said Russia is willing to use the Indian rupee for international trade. Amongst the Indian public itself, there appears to be a lot of support for the country's position on Russia. Here's a sample of the mood on the streets of Delhi.
Because we have a lot to gain from this, because see, like when you see that we are now directly buying the oil from Russia. We couldn't do that earlier, and we can now do that. And we have a long-standing trade relation, we buy our military aircrafts and all from Russia. We have this BrahMos missile joint venture with Russia. So I think it's pretty good thing that, that we are pretty vocal about our support for Russia now.
India's stand is absolutely fine because they are standing up for themselves, which we should be doing.
And let's get more on this from Garima Mohan. She's a fellow at the Asia program at the think tank, the German Marshall Fund. Garima, to quote US President Joe Biden, India is being seen as, quote, somewhat shaky on Russia. Help us understand where India stands right now.
So India is in a bit of a difficult position because it has a long-standing partnership with Russia. But one has to understand that the nature of the India-Russia partnership has changed significantly. India's position right now of a studied neutrality does not mean that it supports Russian actions. It just has a different approach as to what to do to solve the current problem. So India had to take a more nuanced position on this question because of the location of Indian students in Ukraine that needed to be evacuated, 20,000 Indian students who were there, India's dependence on Russia for military equipment and technology, which a lot of other countries have not agreed to do in the past, and Russia has provided certain equipment to India. Given the crisis it faces with China on the border, which flared up in 2020 and hasn't really gone away, this is playing a very important role in India's calculus. In the long term, however, India's approach is that isolating Russia will probably not be helpful. It wants to preserve whatever remnants of a leverage it still has with Moscow. So Russia does not reach the conclusion that China is its only partner in the world. And India wants to be able to retain the leverage to influence what's going on. I have to say that it has been made clear to us that in private, India has strongly criticized Russia's actions, right. And even with the Lavrov visit today, we saw some of that.
You talked about China a little while earlier, and the partnership between Russia and China has been defined as a no-limits partnership by the leaders of both nations. How does that figure into New Delhi's view on ties with Moscow?
That is exactly the reason why New Delhi is so concerned, because the key factor for India is the threat from China. And in case that this gets worse, India does not want Russia to play spoiler and side with China, and India wants Russia to play a somewhat constructive role. So this is, of course, playing into India's calculations. But some have also noted that the Russia-China partnership is perhaps a little bit overblown currently, this is not an alliance, and Russia would not want to be a junior partner to China. But of course, India is watching this development very closely, and it is worrying for Indian policymakers right now.
And of course, Garima, Delhi has also faced a lot of criticism over its plans to buy cheap Russian crude oil in the wake of the Ukraine invasion. And I'd just like to play for our viewers an exchange between visiting UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss and Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar last evening in Delhi. Let's just have a quick listen.
Ultimately, it's oil and gas that is funding Putin's war machine, and we need to cut off reliance on that, and we need a timetable to end reliance on Russian oil and gas. So we need to do more, and we can't be complacent.
Now, I was just reading a report today that in the month of March, Europe has bought, I think, 15% more oil and gas from Russia than it did the month before. If you look at the major buyers of oil and gas from Russia, I think you'd find most of them are in Europe.
Garima, just listening to that exchange, I suppose the main question really is if India is right to purchase oil from Russia now, given that it's clear that this money will be used and has been used to fund Russian aggression in Ukraine.
So I think another point that the Indian Foreign Minister made yesterday in this exchange that you played perhaps explains a little bit more the Indian position. He said that India continues to buy a majority of its oil from the Middle East, 7 to 8% from the United States, and only about 1% from Russia. So I think for the Indian government, which is, the country is just coming out of the devastating Delta wave, and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is being keenly felt by citizens, by consumers. Oil prices are sky high. For the government, of course, it has to balance both of these concerns. But I think a point that Minister Jaishankar is trying to make is that this isn't perhaps the strongest point to hold India to account to, given that a lot of Europeans are also, continuing to buy this. And Foreign Secretary Truss made the point that this is a long-term thing. Countries will have to reduce dependence on actors like Russia and perhaps also China. But this doesn't happen overnight. It has to be a long-term thing.
But despite that, India is coming in for a fair bit of criticism, particularly from its Western partners on its, let's call it continued fence-sitting when it comes to India's position on Russia. Is India concerned that this might affect its relations with its Western partners moving forward?
I don't think that India is actually coming under criticism. If you look at the statements that we saw from visiting foreign dignitaries in the last week. We had the UK Foreign Secretary, we had the Foreign and Security Policy Advisor to the German Chancellor, Mr. Plotner visit India, his counterpart from the Netherlands visit India. And what I found interesting in all of their statements was that they said that would we like India to be in our camp? Yes, but we understand the position that India is taking currently. And to quote Mr. Plotner, he even said that India is in a particular geopolitical situation itself. It has challenges it is facing in its neighborhood, and therefore we understand the calculus that India has made. I think one thing India has done is that it has made clear to partners in the West why it is taking the position that it is choosing to publicly not call out Russia, but it does not support Russian actions. Right. And even though it has abstained in UN votes, it has issued public statements explaining its problems with the war and the path that Russia has chosen to take. Even today, with the meetings after Foreign Minister Lavrov, the Indian Foreign Minister announced that any conflicts should be solved through diplomacy, dialogue, respecting the UN Charter, international law, sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries. Now, this is the strongest statement you would get from India, strongest official statement condemning the war that you would get from India.
If I can just get you to look into your crystal ball, Garima, and briefly at that, do you think moving forward, India will continue to remain neutral, as it were, with regard to Russia, or is that position likely to change?
I think if we look at Indian foreign policy post-Cold War from the 50s onwards, it has always taken the position of not publicly criticizing countries, but expressing its anger privately. It believes that isolating countries does not leave room for change. As a country that had sanctions imposed on itself, it also has a different view of sanctions. So I think we have to be a bit careful in characterizing the Indian position as fence-sitting or neutral. But as we see, particularly the Russia-China relationship develop further, and India, if it sees that it is not, it is losing a bit of its leverage with Moscow, of course, India will have to go back to the drawing board and rethink the decisions that it is making.
Garima Mohan from the German Marshall Fund. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.